Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another recent interview. As I said a month ago, we're going to be conducting interviews with high-profile guests. This week, I have Fleur Hassan, a special envoy and former deputy mayor of Jerusalem. Thank you for joining the show, Fleur. How are you?
Thank you so much, and it's good. How are you?
Good, good. So thank you for having me on. And if you guys haven't seen Fleur, you probably have seen her. She's been on Piers Morgan. We've been Eliko Leban, and obviously she's Jewish and she's a big advocate for the Israeli people. And as you know me, I am Iranian and I'm not Jewish, but I also support Israel in their fight against Hamas, against their fight against Hezbollah, and also against their fight against the Islamic Republic, which is the head of the snake. And the first question I have for you, Fleur, is what do you think is going to happen now that Trump is elected? What do you think is going to happen moving forward for the Middle East?
Well, that's a great question, Eunice. And, I think that ultimately the problem with the previous or the current US administration, one of the
Hmm.
reasons why they lost, I think, is because their strategy with the Islamic Republic of Iran has been, and this is kind of the Obama doctrine of appeasement, of trying to make
Yes.
a deal with them, of trying to give them some type of slower pathway towards the nuclear weapon. Are we crazy? We are
Yeah.
talking, as you well know more than me, about a crazy, misogynistic, genocidal, Islamic regime that is subjugating its own people in Iran, good people who want peace. And to appease them is like Churchill would have said, is to feed the crocodile, hoping that he will eat you last. And what I'm praying and hoping is that President Trump will actually take a different, a little bit more stronger stance against the Islamic Republic of Iran and perhaps help Israel finish the job and free the people of Iran.
Okay, and what do you think he's going to do specifically? Like, what do you think his policies are going to be? What do you think he's going to do in terms of helping Netanyahu? Do you think he's going to give him more weaponry, or if is he going to give him more, license to kill, let's say, to strike specific nuclear sites or military sites, or potentially take out specific leaders? Because the past administration, they almost tied Netanyahu's hands behind his back to the
Oh,
point he
yeah.
couldn't respond in the way that he wants. And I actually really salute Netanyahu for the way he conducted the war in Hamas and Hezbollah, like going against the curve and basically destroying Hezbollah and Hamas, even when the international community is telling him not to. But I feel like now he should be a lot more emboldened with Trump coming into power. So, what do you think Trump is going to do specifically in terms of helping him?
Well, it's interesting because I was just reading that the
Yeah,
Americans have just uncovered a plot, Iranian plot to kill Trump.
yeah,
So Trump is not going to be a happy camper with the Iranians at the
exactly.
moment. Look, Netanyahu has been shouting and screaming from the rooftops about Iran for
Mhm.
20 years. He
Yeah.
was completely focused on trying to prevent the Islamic Republic from getting a nuclear weapon because he knew that a
Hmm.
nuclear weapon in the hands of an Islamic genocidal regime is dangerous not just to Israel, but to the entire free world. And
Yeah,
and I think maybe the overfocus of Netanyahu
yeah,
on the nuclear weapon and the underfocus on the proxies is what got October 7th to happen to begin with, but we're already a year on. And so what
yeah.
I'm praying is that United States would let Israel, support Israel, and maybe even fight with Israel to
Hmm.
destroy the nuclear capabilities of, like I said, a genocidal, misogynistic regime that is
Hmm.
subjugating its own people. Because this is like Hitler with a nuclear weapon. And that's how we have
Yeah,
to see the Islamic Republic of Iran. They are the modern day Hitler. And the
mm,
world has so far been Chamberlain instead of Churchill. And what I'm
yes.
hoping now is that the combination of Trump in the White House and Netanyahu, who's been itching to deal with Iran for 20 years, will create a situation where we can actually bring down the mullahs. And the people who will be the happiest about this will be the Iranian people who will finally be free, and people like you who will finally be able to go home to your homeland without fear of persecution.
Exactly, and people don't realize that Iranians they have such a unique perspective on the issue, and that's why
Hmm.
majority of Iranians are actually
Hmm.
pro-Israeli because they've seen how a society can go downhill after the Islamic Republic of Iran took over, and also the Persians and the Jews they have a very long history of more than 2,500 years where they formed
Yes.
an alliance when Cyrus the Great conquered parts of Israel back in the day, but then he had the first Bill of Human Rights in which the Jews and the Persians coexisted peacefully
Yes, and
until obviously,
before the revolution in Iran,
yeah,
Israel
exactly,
and Iran were great friends. I met a woman who her father was an Iranian military guy, and she used to come with her father to Israel when she was a little girl. Her father was
yeah,
killed, was murdered by the mullahs after the revolution, and
yeah.
this is what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with.
Exactly, and as I said, I'm not Jewish. I'm not Jewish myself. I'm a spiritual person. I'm not religious. I'm not. I can call myself an ex-Muslim, but I'm not really talking about that. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe that all religions are, their perspective on God. Let's say. However, I just feel like there are like this is what I also want to address with you because as much as I admire Netanyahu and what he's done, I do think that there are certain hardliners within the Israeli government. Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, there are hardliners in the Israeli government who
Yeah,
I wouldn't agree with. Who, me as a feminist, are not they're not my cup
yeah,
of tea either. The problem in Israel is that we have a system of government where you don't have one winner. You have to create a coalition to create a government. Same thing in Spain. Same thing in a way in France. And Netanyahu had to create a coalition with these more right wing people because the center of the political map in Israel refused to sit with Netanyahu. He became
yeah,
like one of these persona non gratas. And because they refused to sit with him, he had no choice. If he wanted, he could have had it. We could have had another election, but we had many, many elections. So he
yeah,
decided to create a coalition with the right wingers, the extreme right wingers, who, I'm not, like I said, they're not my cup of tea. But I think Netanyahu does a good job in controlling them.
yeah,
Although, there are definitely issues with them. But it's a democratic country. You
yeah,
can't say these people are not legitimate. They were voted for. Maybe they're going to be less voted for next time, I hope. But
yeah,
ultimately, like the people who say, well, he's not legitimate, we are a democracy. Whoever gets elected, we have certain rules in Israel. Certain people cannot get elected. There are people who went to court in Israel to the High Court to try and get Ben Gvir to be out of the political system. And the court ruled that they had no reason legally to exclude him from the political system. At the same time, there's
yeah,
also people who go to the High Court of Israel to say that certain Arab parties who are allied with the Muslim Brotherhood should also not run in the Israeli parliament. And the High Court also said that they can do. So we have extremists on all sides. Netanyahu had to create this jigsaw puzzle of the thing. Am I happy with it? No. Would I like a more centrist government? Absolutely. But that's the democratic process that we have here.
yeah, exactly. And I always tell people like Israel is a democracy. Like 3 months before the war started, people were in the streets in Israel protesting
They
Netanyahu.
still are.
Not a
They still
single,
are.
not a single Israeli died. But try protesting Hamas in Gaza, you would get beheaded. Or try
Of
protesting the
course.
Islamic Republic in Iran. So in that sense, Israel is a democracy. But I just have a few questions regarding the events that led up to the 7th of October because Mossad is probably the greatest intelligence gathering agency in the world. And Hamas has been running this huge operation for 20 years. They've been building tunnels, planning for this attack. What do you think went wrong? Like, how do you think that the Israeli government, like, are you telling me they didn't know they were building tunnel? They must have known. And B, they had intel that's saying there was an attack coming. They didn't take it seriously. And then when the attack happened, it took hours for IDF to respond. So where do you think that whole thing went wrong? Do you think there's a conspiracy there? Or what's your opinion on the whole thing?
Well, that's a great question and something
Yeah,
that the Israelis have been grappling with. How on earth could this have happened? How could the country that is the
Yeah.
initiator of the exploding beepers, have
Mm.
let this happen? And that really is a very, very good question. And I've been trying to figure out, read, and speak to experts about this over the last year to try and come to terms with what happened, why the response was so slow, etc. I have certain answers. First of all, I think that there was an element of Israeli military arrogance, that they knew where the problems were. And the problems were with Hezbollah, the problems were with the Islamic Republic, the focus on the north, and not enough focus on Gaza. There was an
Mhm.
erroneous understanding that somehow you could pay, because what was happening is that through Qatar, Israel was letting money go in. It was like protection money. Somehow we could pay these crazy ideologues for quiet, that we
Mhm.
could buy quiet by making sure monies were coming in from Qatar. That was wrong, but it was a national security consensus. The
Yeah.
military, the government, everybody believed that this was the right thing. That's the first thing. Secondly, there was not enough human intelligence and over reliance on technology. So, for many years, and I think we have seen the fruits of that in Lebanon and also in Iran, that Israel has a great, great network of human intelligence. You can call them collaborators, you can call them whatever you want, but
Mhm.
intelligence on the ground. That's really how we've managed to do all the operations in Iran and in Lebanon. And in Gaza, there was less human intelligence. Also, Sinwar, when he got power in the Gaza Strip, he dedicated his time to basically murdering anybody he thought was collaborating with Israel. So between Sinwar's witch hunt and Israel getting a little bit arrogant and over reliant on
Mm.
technology, there was almost no human intelligence coming out of the Gaza Strip. The third thing is that we got used to, there's a really wonderful analogy or metaphor about a frog in hot water. So when a frog
Yeah.
is in water that starts to heat and heat and heat, a frog can stay in hot water. But if you throw a frog into boiling water, the
Mhm.
frog will die. But if the frog is already in the hot water when it boils, it doesn't die. And that's kind of how we were in Israel. Do you remember when they came to the fence? They were sending explosive balloons. They did
Yeah.
so much that every time we saw them coming, we thought, it was like a false flag. You know what I mean? And add a little misogyny to all of this when they ignored the women who were the lookout women. They were in the lookout posts on the
Mhm.
border. They kept saying, something is off, something is afoot, and they ignored them. I call that misogyny. If they were 19-year-old young women, would they have been ignored? So, for all those reasons, I believe that this happened. The delayed response was just a result of the fact that they weren't
Mm.
prepared. They went for 7 hours. These terrorists had free hand, and
Yeah, but just to play
and one
devil's
day they will.
advocate here,
Yeah,
just to
yeah,
play devil's advocate, and I'm not suggesting by any means that the Israel government done this on purpose, but obviously the conspiracy theorists, they say, well, they knew about this attack. They knew that Iran was going to do something to undermine the Abraham Accords, and Netanyahu kind of just let it happen so he can invade Gaza and he can attack Hezbollah. Do you think there is any basis to that? Like, do you think there might be a conspiracy there that they just let
absolutely
it
not.
happen? No.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'll tell you why. In Israel,
Okay.
the most sacred thing is human life. This is a disaster. What happened is a disaster, is a military intelligence disaster. These people, because we live in a free and fair democracy, the government of Israel, all of its leaders will face a national inquiry about what
Yeah.
happened. Israel has come up with a lot of creative stunts, but sacrificing 1,200 of its own people,
Yeah.
350 people in a dance party, never, never. The most
Yeah.
important
Yeah.
thing in Israel is life and saving lives. So the conspiracy. There's always conspiracies. They're wrong. What was here was a huge screw up.
Hmm.
Yes, a huge screw up. a huge lack of intelligence planning. Look, the Yom Kippur War, ironically, 1973, when I was born, the Yom Kippur
Yeah,
War was also a huge intelligence disaster that almost cost Israel its existence.
yeah.
And ironically, 2 weeks before the 7th of October, I wrote an article saying, would the Yom Kippur War happen again? And I said, no, so it
Mm.
can't. We're too prepared. And look what
But then the
happens.
thing is, I feel like you guys got very comfortable because you had people coming from Gaza to Israel to work, and obviously the same
Yes,
people
we
were
gave them
gathering intelligence.
20,000. We gave them 20, because this is who Israel is. People don't believe
Yeah,
me. Israel is
yeah,
a
and this
country that
whole
wants
idea
to
about
live with its
genocide and
neighbors.
yeah,
20,000 working permits we gave
yes,
Gazans.
yes, and these same people
20,000
worked.
work permits.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they worked with the UN and they gathered intelligence, and the same people, they knew all the addresses, and that's how they massacred all the people. But it's happened now, obviously, and I can never say I'm glad anything like that would happen, but I'm glad this war happened because it brought to the forefront or the end of Hamas, the end of Hezbollah, and hopefully the end of the Islamic Republic. Because honestly, as an Iranian, we've had many uprisings in the last 46 years since we've been occupied by the Islamic Republic, and every time Iranian people come out and protest, they get shot, they get killed, they get hanged, and
And
they
nobody
protest for
helps them. And nobody
exactly,
helps them.
exactly, and
America
that's
didn't help them. America never helps them. It's
yeah,
disgraceful. But
exactly,
unfortunately, Israel cannot bring down the Iranian regime by itself.
yeah,
In order for us to get rid of the nuclear threat, in order for us to really let the people of Iran take over, like you say, get rid of this horrible Islamist occupation, we need America to help. And this
yeah,
is why the election of Trump could be that
yeah,
pivotal moment in history, Eunice,
yeah,
when this was the beginning of the end of the
yes,
Islamic Republic of Iran. And I pray to God for
yeah,
our sake, but for your sake as well. I pray for the day that I can
yeah,
go to Tehran and the Tehranis can come to Jerusalem. I pray for that day because I know that the Iranian people, right now, the only people standing with Israel, because they know exactly what Islamic
yeah,
fundamentalism look like, and they know that the Iranian regime is behind all of the proxies that are attacking Israel, and they don't want to finish with Israel. They only want to start with Israel. The finish is the free world. The finish is America. And I think the Republican Party understands that, unfortunately, better than the Democratic Party did.
exactly. So I'm going to take you back to the first of the conversation because if you there's a few issues here, and I'm going to go through them one by one. Obviously, I want Iran freed, but then the problem with striking the nuclear facilities, for example, there's some nuclear facilities near Isfahan, and if you strike those nuclear facilities, you might have a contamination situation where a city of Isfahan can be uninhabitable for the next 100 years. So it's not as easy as saying, "Oh yeah, well, strike
No,
the nuclear
I
facilities."
know.
Then you might have end up having half of Iran contaminated, like the same thing that
Yeah,
happened in Ukraine. So,
yeah.
personally speaking, I just don't know why. Like I always like ever since I was a kid, I was watching like the Friday prayers with Khamenei and stuff, and I was thinking like, what stops America just putting a rocket right in that middle where there's Khamenei and all his generals? Like, what stops them from doing
But
that?
did you
And
see?
obviously, you can
Did you?
argue like international law, this and that, blah blah blah. I'm like, dude, like literally a drone during that Friday prayer would solve the world's problems, and you don't even
Well,
need to
did you
need
see
like the
Khamenei? Did you see Khamenei
yeah,
in Hania's
yeah,
funeral when he
yeah,
was
yeah,
looking up, saying,
yeah,
"Shit,
yeah,
they might attack us right now"? Yeah. Look, I
yeah,
don't know. I'm not a military expert, Eunice. I can just tell you
yeah.
that we need to find a way to do it. Look, ideally would be to bankrupt the regime
Yeah,
and not have to attack anything. But even
yeah,
think about when Israel attacked Iran, the Islamic Republic, a few weeks ago. There was not one casualty. Not one casualty.
exactly. And
Imagine
this whole
that.
idea that Israel is genocidal, if I always tell
It's
people, look,
ridiculous.
if Israel wanted to be genocidal, this war would have been over 7th of October. They
We
could
could
have
have
nuked all of Gaza. They could
Gaza
have
would have
turned
been
everything to
carpet
glass.
bombed. Exactly.
Exactly. So this idea that they're
People don't
genocide, as a
understand
matter of fact,
genocide.
Israel is doing a world a favor by taking out Hezbollah, by taking out Hamas. So then when
Oh
people
my
say free
God.
Palestine, yeah, free Palestine from Hamas, free Lebanon from Hezbollah, and free Iran from the Islamic Republic. And I really hope that that happens in the near future. I just
Amen.
wonder, like, what is your opinion on Elika Leban? Because obviously she's Iranian, and I've seen you with her on Piers Morgan, and I think there's a lot of alignment. I agree with a lot of things that she says. Hopefully, I'll actually have her on this show in the near
Good.
future. And just tell me about let me know about your friendship with her, the
Oh,
alliance between the
well,
Persians and the
we
Jews.
just, well, I
Yeah,
think she's a very eloquent, wonderful woman who's doing a great job. She's, it's easier for her to make the case because she's not Jewish and she's
yeah,
not Israeli. And she's coming from a perspective of a persecuted person of Iranian origin. And I think that in the press, that actually plays much better than an Israeli talking about this, because, like you, she understands exactly the dangers of Islamist political Islam, essentially.
yeah.
I was in the Piers Morgan with her. I don't know her. We're not friends, but we have some mutual friends, and I salute her for the incredible work that she's doing as an advocate.
What do you think of Piers Morgan? Do you think
Ah,
he's a showman, or do you think, because actually this is what I think about Piers Morgan. I feel like he plays both sides and he brings both sides of the
I
argument to get
agree.
more views. However, I feel
Yeah.
like deep down he actually agrees with Israel, but he would never come out and say it directly because he doesn't want to lose his pro-Palestine audience as well.
I agree with you. I don't know
Yeah,
whether you're old enough to remember the Jerry Springer show. Do you remember the Jerry Springer show?
yeah, yeah.
It
I've
was a
seen clips
show
of
in
it.
America, and they'd just
Yeah,
bring people, and these people would fight and argue, and that was great ratings. And I think
mm,
that Piers does this, and he gets great ratings, and he likes a showdown. I think two things. I think you're right. I think ultimately he does agree with Israel, but for some reason he has a real aversion to Netanyahu and somehow blames Netanyahu for 100 years of history
yeah.
of the Palestinians being aggressive to Israel and the Arab countries around Israel. But yeah, I pretty much agree with your assessment of his.
Okay, so fast forward 2 to 4 years, because I made the same prediction. I said the Islamic Republic of Iran is going to fall in the next 2 to 4 years if Trump is elected. And I said
Yeah,
we need three different factors. We need international support, which is going to be Israel and America, taking out specific targets, heads of state. And then we need an internal uprising within Iran. And we
yeah, we
also need a
do.
strong opposition. And I hope to be part of that opposition to be able to one day go
Amen.
back and take control of Iran.
Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. And I just think this element of that's why I try to unite all the Persians outside, because I feel like there's a lot of talented, intelligent, wealthy
Yeah, I
Iranians,
agree.
but I just don't think they are aligned and they are not in a team, because I feel like we had an opportunity 2 years ago with the whole Mahsa Amini protest, but then I don't think Shahzad
Yes,
Reza Pahlavi, he wasn't strong enough in that moment in time to.
wasn't
But
strong
then I
enough,
feel
and
like now
also
we need
you
to
were.
build a coalition.
Yes,
Yeah,
but you also needed international support. And
yeah,
unfortunately, nobody stood with you 2 years ago. It was disgusting,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like the combination of these three things, it will lead to the Islamic, the fall of the Islamic Republic, which is a new dawn for the whole world, because Iran is in the top five richest countries in the world. We're the second highest gas producer, second highest oil producer. It will be a big boom for the whole international market in
Oh my
terms of
God, it would be
everything.
amazing. It
It's a
would be
gold mine.
amazing. To get rid of the
Yeah,
mullahs there
yeah,
would be an incredible new era for the Middle East. The Middle East could become a superpower, the superpower between
yeah.
Saudi and Iran and Israel with its innovation. Honestly, we could
Yeah.
lead the world.
Exactly, and the funny thing is, as I said, Persians were never really Muslims anyway. It was Islam was something
That's
that was
right.
imposed on us. So
Exactly.
so that's why we have this unique perspective on the whole Middle East, and the Jews also have this unique perspective from a different angle. But then the rest of the area, is Muslims. However, I have to say, like, I'm very impressed with people like Mohammed bin Salman. They are very forward-thinking people.
I
They are,
absolutely, and Mohammed
yeah,
bin Zayed, listen, the
yeah,
Sunni moderates countries
yeah,
have kicked out their version of the Shia extremists. They've kicked out the
or
Muslim
Sunni
Brotherhood,
extremists as well.
The Sunni extremists.
Yeah,
They've kicked out the Sunni extremists,
yeah,
and we have to understand that that's what it's about. It's about the extremism. Unfortunately, in the Islamic Republic, the extremism are ruling. But in the Sunni moderate countries, they've been kicked out. And just like
Yeah.
they've been kicked out, we need to kick out the Shia extremists and
Yeah.
the Sunni extremists, of
But
course.
it's just so funny to me that these Islamic countries in the Middle East have come to the realization that they cannot be extremists anymore. And then somehow the
Isn't
Islamic
that
Republic has
amazing?
managed to export their ideology to Harvard University, where they have encampments. And
Unbelievable.
I'm thinking like the Middle East has got rid of this virus now, and now they're exporting it to Europe. This is one of the reasons. Like, I don't know if you've seen my older videos, but one of the reasons I went viral in the beginning was that I questioned Islamism, and I question, even the Quran. Like, don't get me wrong, all religions say right and wrong, but then this idea that you're Islamophobic sometimes, no, you're not Islamophobic if you criticize Islam based on the Quran and what it says and the scripture, and they believe these things because of those scriptures, and you need to separate, religion and spirituality and moderates and stuff. So I think this
Well,
was a big
this is
issue
what
in the
I've
Middle
said
East.
all along.
Yeah,
Qatar, you
yeah,
have to point to Qatar. Qatar now, I don't know whether you heard, the Qatar wants to kick out Hamas. Why? Because
yeah,
Trump gets
Trump.
elected.
Yes,
So
yes.
ultimately, Qatar, who've been playing both sides, talk about somebody playing both sides, Qatar
Mm.
have been poisoning the West, have been buying up the souls of universities to
Properties as well.
think that, yes, in London, they've bought 40 billion
Yes.
pounds worth of
Yeah.
assets. They've bought out
They have more
London.
properties than the royal family in London.
Absolutely, it's crazy. And in America, they've bought all the think tanks, all the think tanks.
Yeah.
They've bought the souls of the universities, and then, of course, you see this extremism. They have been engineered to the professors that have been bought with Qatari
Yeah.
money have been completely brainwashed, or they're brainwashing their students because they realized, them and the Islamic Republic of Iran realized one thing, that they can't beat the West militarily. You can't beat America militarily. But you could create a situation where America disintegrates from within. Russia's also a part of this evil
Yes.
alliance. And that's
Exactly. This
exactly
whole
what we're
woke
seeing in
ideology.
America. But
Yeah.
this is exactly what America has voted against. So
Exactly.
you've got to bless the wisdom of the crowds, because people are not stupid. You want to call people stupid? People at the end of the day know instinctively what's
Hmm.
bad for them. And that's what
Yeah.
America voted against.
Exactly. It's the unholy marriage of wokeism and Islamism, which
Yeah.
is
I
very
talk about
unholy because
wokeism
they,
a lot.
yeah, and which is like they're the polar opposites, because Islamism and
Now, of
wokeism are the
course, they're the
complete
polar
opposites.
opposites. The only thing that unites them is the hatred of Jews.
Exactly. They call it the shoe horse theory when they say the two extremes of an ideology end up coming back together
It's
at the end.
it's liberal fascism. It's woke fascism. That's what it is.
Exactly.
People are
And
not
we
free to
we
talk.
as a people, we as a people have to speak up against this, because I feel like to this day 95% of people are very pro Palestine, and I'm like, you guys are idiots. And I don't mean to offend them, because yeah, they probably see on TV all these dead kids. They're like, oh my god, Israel is so evil, but they just don't seem to understand what is happening. And this is what I'm trying to do in terms of educating people, that look, Israel are not the bad guys here. The
Well,
only people that
nobody
actually care
wants
about
children. Listen,
yeah,
nobody wants children to die. We didn't
yeah,
start this war. They could have ended the war in 2 weeks. Nothing had to.
exactly,
All they had to do was give back the hostages. It would have been over.
yeah,
I don't think Hezbollah and Iran understood how Sinwar was going to take them down the tubes. But that's exactly what he's done. And in a
yeah.
way, this started is going to be a historic shift. I pray this is going to be a historic shift.
Exactly. One last question, Fleur. For the next 2 to 4 years, like, what do you think is going to happen now? Let's say we're in 2026, 2028. What do you think will happen from now till then? Where do you think the war is going to go? How do you think the world will be finished? Do you think the Abraham Accords will be signed? Do you think there will be something called the Cyrus Accords, where Iran could be joined if the Islamic
Yeah.
Republic of Iran? Just give me look into the future and
Well,
just let me know
best
what you
case
think.
best case
Yeah.
scenario, we get rid of the mullahs in Iran. We get rid of the
Mm.
Islamic Republic. Honestly, best case scenario for the world, not just for Israel, for the world, for Iran, for the region, everything. Trump says to Bibi, do it, or Trump said, let's do it together. Either way,
Hmm.
it would work. Help empower the Iranian people. maybe have the son of the Shah be a transitional leader. He's already said he doesn't want to be another dictator. He could be a transitional leader, maybe
No, he's
somebody
not a
else.
dictator,
I
yeah, but
I want to get him. I don't want to get involved in the Iranian people's own right
yeah,
to choose their own leaders. But whatever happens, there's a transition towards a government that actually cares for its people, stop the persecution of women, stop the persecution of minorities. The minute the Islamist Republic falls there, I think there's going to be a domino effect. We'll get rid of the proxies because the proxies are being funded by Iran, nobody else. And then, honestly, we could have a new era of peace and prosperity, looking
yeah,
forward to the next 50 years in the region, where everybody can live in peace and dignity, where the Palestinians could have leaders that are not corrupt and
yeah,
not genocidal. I have a lot of Palestinian friends, deep relationships, and they hate their leadership because they know that their leadership has only benefited and profited themselves, that the conflict
exactly.
has made them rich, and they know this. So,
Mhm.
a new leadership for the Middle East involves the end of the Islamic Republic, new leadership for the Palestinians, a new era for the Middle East. Saudi was ready to sign peace with Israel on October the 7th because of the mullahs not wanting Saudi to sign peace with Israel. That's why it happened. So
Yeah,
today we need to reverse that and sign a whole regional arrangement, including the Islamic Republic of Iran, without the Islamists, including Iran. And honestly, you and I can look forward to a wonderful, wonderful future of peace and prosperity here.
exactly. And what people don't realize, like people like myself that was born in Iran, so I actually saw firsthand what, what a beautiful society can go really downhill because of
Yeah,
Islamic extremism. And people like me have a very unique perspective because,
yeah.
you see lot of these pro-Palestinian marches,
They
and
don't
it's
know what
just
they're
kids
talking
that they're
about.
born here. They're born
They
here. They
don't
don't know what
know.
oppression is. They don't
They're
know what,
armchair activists. They
yeah,
have no idea what war looks like. They have no idea what repression looks like. I've got a friend in Poland, and we were
yeah,
talking to this guy, this young guy who's like a Mexican communist. He says, she says to him, "Do you know what communism looks like?" I know what
mm,
communism looks like. If you knew what it actually looks like, you wouldn't be talking this way. And it's the same thing with this Islamist Republic, the Islamic Republic of Iran. People don't know what they're talking about.
exactly. And I feel like voices are like ours is very important. And also this guy Musab Hassan Yusuf, that I really
He's
recommend
amazing. Yeah, he's
everyone to
great.
go and read his book.
He's
He was
amazing.
the son of the founder of Hamas. And when someone like that speaks against Hamas, you should listen to him, and you should listen to people that were born in that environment, that they know what they're talking about, instead of these
Absolutely.
armchair activists that try to virtue signal and say, "Oh, look
Hmm.
at us, we're the good guys, we care about the oppressed."
Yeah,
Yeah, but
they don't know anything.
they don't know anything. Palestinians are oppressed by Hamas, so
Yeah,
Iranians are oppressed by the Islamic Republic, and the whole world is actually oppressed because of these people. Flo
absolutely.
Hassan, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. By the way, this is not a Palestinian flag. This is a piece of art that I need to maybe change, maybe put some blue ribbons on it or something. And yeah, thank you very much for your time, Fleur. And
Thank
speak
you,
soon.
Eunice.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Cheers. Bye bye.